David Davis is interested in politics. He ran for council in the last election. He's also a diesel technician, and his passion is fixing transports and farm equipment. He rents in Stratford.
Hi, everyone. All right, so let's just get right into this because there's a bit to cover. First things first, I went over a lot of information about like statistical analysis of what's happening with the housing prices at a presentation to council, which can be provided to you if you would like to see that and you want to get the nitty gritty of the numbers of what is really causing the housing inflation that we're seeing. This is going to be more of an overview on what all three levels of government should be doing and what they're currently doing and where to look and keep an eye. So first things first, I'm sure everyone saw or might have seen most recently that Poilievre and the Liberals were going back and forth arguing about whose red tape and whose actions were causing less houses to be built to inflate the market. And Doug Ford was talking about paving the green belt so that he can build more homes so that he can stop the housing inflation. So the question then gets raised, does building more homes reduce the cost of housing? And do we have a shortage of housing? Well, just a real quick refresher. In 2011, we had 12,851,821 citizens in Ontario. In 2021, we have 14,223,942. That's a difference over 10 years of 9.7%. As for housing, in 2011, we had 4,887,508 homes. In 2021, we have 5,651,648. That's a difference of 13.5%. So we have been building more homes than we have been adding to our population consistently for a decade. Right now, if we look at Canada-wide vacant homes, the most recent study was done in 2021, and it showed that we have 1.3 million vacant homes in Canada. 400,000 of those vacant homes are in Ontario. Ontario has the largest number of vacant homes in the entire country, representing almost 40% of them. 8% of all homes in Canada right now are vacant. Now, this does not count multi-dwelling units like long-term care facilities, student housing. That's not counted in that number. Those are apartments or houses. 8% of all of them are empty. In contrast, our homeless population in Canada is only around 300,000. So we would still have 1 million homes left if we provided one to every single homeless person. Every night, between 25,000 and 35,000 Canadians sleep on the street. And annually, homelessness costs taxpayers $7 billion a year. The increase in cost of housing from 2016 to 2021 went up by 202%. In 5 years, we increased our housing costs 202%. Now I'm going to break down the three levels of government, what they're currently doing, what they can be doing. And when I'm talking municipalities, I'm also going to be very specific on Stratford. The number one thing that the municipalities need to be doing is to not designate any land as excess so it can be sold to developers, period. Just don't do it. The municipality owns the land. Do not give that land to developers under any circumstances ever again, period. We have a finite number of land. We do not have, and that's it. If we keep building what we're building, we're going to run out this problem without fixing it and run out of land. On top of that, there's the supply issues. All of the costs for builds of homes have been increasing because we've been building so many more homes than before. We used to only build about 67,500 homes a year. We're now building over 100,000 a year under Doug Ford. So we've been consistently building almost double, 40% increase, 33% increase in homes, and yet the cost of housing is still going up. So building homes isn't fixing the problem. We need to look at new avenues for creating homes as a municipality and regulating the sales of those homes, as well as looking at things like tiny homes for homeless individuals and doing things like we did during wartime, which is where we built smaller homes for families that were more affordable and weren't sold directly on the open market. The presented plan for attainable housing that the Invest Stratford and them have recently brought forward doesn't do anything innovative. It is, they've looked at three options. One is give the land to developers and hope for the best. Two is spend $71 million building our own affordable housing. And 3 was hope that a non-for-profit decides to come in and save us. These options, this shouldn't be the only options you have at all. We should be looking at building homes to sell as well, and using that money to fund building affordable homes that we rent. We also need to start to try to beat provincial regulations. Like, the city might still have a bylaw that says affordable is 30% of your income, but the new build in Britannia which is registered as affordable, isn't registered at 30% of someone's income. It's not. It can be up to 40% of someone's income based on the income brackets that they provided to us and the cost of the apartments. They're not following their own bylaw. They've switched directly. This was built under the previous legislation, under the previous regulations. And yet the day that we were able to list it with a new price that was increased, we did. And there's no need for that. Municipalities don't have to charge the maximum amount they can. We also need to regulate the number of short-term rental licenses given by municipality or given by ward in larger cities. Municipalities in some cities have seen as high as 60% increase in the number of short-term rentals like Airbnb. 31,000 long-term rentals were turned to short-term rentals in 2019 alone across Canada. A March 2020 study compiled in the US found that a 1% increase in Airbnb listings equals a 0.018% increase in rental costs and a 0.0026% increase in housing prices overall for the entire municipality. That's per percentage. So when we have municipalities having a 60% increase, those numbers add up very quickly. As for the provincial government has increased the homes from 67,000 to 100,000 in just the last few years. And what's happening with that is landlords are buying new homes and expecting tenants to cover that mortgage, even though these new homes are coming in at so much higher price points because we're building so many and supply issues are rising. And so wood's gone up, everything else has gone up. Houses are now being more expensive, and the new landlords expect people to come in and cover their investment when they buy an overly inflated property. When that happens, other landlords look at that, and while they might have owned their property for 20 years, they say, why is this guy charging 3,000 when I'm charging 700? This incentivizes them to do things like rent evictions and stating that they're going to be moving in family or whatever they need to do to get the tenants out so that they can jack the price of rent up as high as they possibly can. Not to mention that the Ford government ended rent control on properties built after, I forget which month it was, but it was the 15th day in 2018. So now new properties do not have any form of rent control. Jessica Biel and the NDP has tabled a bill, Bill 48, which it's called rent control for all tenants. And that would then reestablish that all properties, regardless of date they're built, would be under the same legislation for rent control. So I would suggest that you show your support to that bill and publicly share it out that you would like Bill 48 to go forward. The NDP has also spoken to tabling legislation that would regulate rent increases in between tenants. Now, this would be vitally important because it would stop people from being incentivized to do rent evictions or pretend to move in families so that they can get new tenants in. And it would make it so that the entire rental market doesn't bubble when more people are being overturned so that they can increase prices. Another thing that we should look at doing or look at getting your province to do is having them block credit checks for landlords. Plain and simple, that's just a way to make people homeless. Credit checks are as old as I am. I'm 33. That's how long we've had credit checks for. This system went from being something we just developed to being something that makes people homeless in 33 years. With removing a lot of these things, such as rent evictions or moving in family, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up having a lot less good tenants get evicted for the purpose of wealth. And in doing so, we will reduce the total number of people that are going through the court system trying to fight evictions. And doing that, it also helps landlords because it allows landlords to get bad tenants out by not flooding the market with good tenants that are just trying to get kicked out to raise funds. Another thing we need to do is we need to fight the province to redefine affordable to be related to household income, not the market. You cannot have affordable housing in relation to the market because the market does whatever it wants to do. And I don't know about the rest of you, but my wages haven't gone up 202% in 5 years. A last thing we need to do, or another thing we need to do for the province, is we need to tell Doug Ford that when he doubled the rent increase in 2023 to 2.5%, that was a one-time thing after rent was frozen during the pandemic, and it needs to go back down to 1.2 to 1.3% annual increases, and not stay at 2.5% going forward and pretend like that's just what the number always was. He doubled it, and it needs to go back down for 2024. As far as what the federal government can do, the federal government needs to expand its rent-to-own program and work directly with municipalities so that when municipalities build these smaller affordable homes, they can go to first-time home buyers using the rent-to-own program, so that for the first 5 years of their payments are actually them only paying for their down payment, so they don't gain ownership for 5 years, which means they can't move in and 6 months later sell the property at full fair market value. It can also use regulations to stop it from being an income property and expand on those as necessary to make sure that these homes are going where they need to be and regulating prices. Another way to do this without relying on the federal government is doing community land trust, which Nicole will talk to later. That is a completely viable alternative option, but one way to do it is expanding our rent-to-own program the federal government's already doing as close as Kitchener. The federal government should also ban price fixing softwares in the rental market. We have companies like YieldStar, which owns most of the market for rental price fixing. It was created by a man named Jeffrey Roper, who was arrested and charged for price fixing when he was in charge of the airline Atlantic. If you remember back in the day, airlines were caught price fixing and some people got charged for it. He was one of them. What did he do? He went and created a program which price fixes the rental market. And as of 2016, it was already representing over 20 million units in Canada and the US. And it just went public a few years ago and is evaluated at $10.5 billion. So in the last 5 years, we have created a $10.5 billion company, and its only job is regulating the cost of rental markets in order to increase revenue. They found what it used to be that rental prices would try to keep occupancy at 100% so they could have the max money coming in. They found that actually, if you just raise the price to an astronomical amount, that you might have more vacancy. They saw a 15% increase in turnover in any property that started using the service in the first year. However, even though you have a higher vacancy rate, everyone else that's there is paying more, so it's fine. The federal government can easily identify that as price fixing and ban it. It's starting in Canada. They've already started their operations as close as Mississauga are now using the software, and we need to ban that quickly because it is price fixing. Plain and simple. There's no argument that it's anything else. And those are where we are in the 3 levels of government, what they're doing, and some things we should support and some things we should get on them about doing.